Hey, what's up? Hello, everybody. Alex Kapitko here, Centered from Reality Podcast. I hope your Wednesday is treating you well. Hey, it's in the 50s here today, and I see some blue sky, so I'll take what I can get at this point. This episode's coming out a few hours behind. I apologize for that. Been kind of a busy week with school and work and just some personal stuff as well, so yeah, lots going on, but I still needed to get this out, so here we are. I also want to just say, check out the show Dairy Girls on Netflix. I've talked a little bit, in recent weeks about the Troubles in Northern Ireland back, well, still kind of happening now, but mainly in the 70s to 2000 era. Kind of a great comedy where it's just about high school girls going to a Catholic school during the Troubles. And, it doesn't really focus on the Troubles, but it just kind of shows what daily life would be like for someone in Londonderry during the Troubles. Quite funny, honestly. Really clever show. Nice little escape. Anyways, today I want to start with talking about Elon Musk, who just bought about 9.2% of Tesla's stock, which made him the majority shareholder, which is interesting to say the least. And some people are up in arms. Some people love it. It just kind of depends, I think, where you're split in somewhat of the culture war. I'm mixed on it. I also then want to end by talking about organized labor in the United States, and there seems to be a comeback happening. Companies like Amazon and Starbucks basically have started to unionize, and obviously the opposition is going to be extremely focused and well-funded, but it's a great start. First, sadly, though, I just want to give a quick Ukraine update. As I mentioned on Monday, we are seeing some of just the horrible atrocities that are coming out of Ukraine. I talked about Bucha on Monday and the mass graves and streets littered with civilian bodies. Again, I'm somewhat glad it's on the record because I've realized an off-ramp for Putin is just not what we can do. This guy needs to be held accountable at The Hague, at least. Now, of course, they're finding this in other cities as they're starting to, look through some of the cities that were occupied by Russians that are now no longer occupied by Russians. And the Biden administration has said that these atrocities are aligned with the broader Russian policy, which is of terrorizing the Ukrainians into submission. And I think that's somewhat right. I mean, clearly they do want to create a sense of fear here. But I think what we're also seeing is kind of just a very destabilized military with no plan, no culture, no strategy. And they're desperately reacting to getting their asses kicked and not being prepared for that. And as they're retreating to the east, I think they're just doing what we've seen in other parts of the world that the Russian troops and even American troops in some cases have done in Iraq, especially Fallujah and stuff like that. The Atlantic has a good article that talks about how this is kind of common when you don't have a great military culture. And soldiers eventually, kind of in desperation, resort to barbarism and awful instincts. Basically, the Atlantic says in this article, in quotes, these sorts of crimes occur when military organizations are committed into combat without clear, achievable objectives and without a professional, non-commissioned officer corps to enforce discipline within the ranks. And I think this does really show us what is happening, because we have to remember that Putin was convinced, or at least lied to by people who were maybe afraid to tell him the wrong thing. Putin was convinced that the military had a skilled and trained officer class and was strategically qualified for this. And he also, I think conscripted personnel were not, in his opinion, part of this force that went into Ukraine. Of course, the opposite now seems to be true. There seems to be a lacking officer class. I've even read, which is mind-blowing to me, that there were generals on the front lines in the Ukrainian invasion. I've listened to American generals talk about just how crazy that is, because usually, I'm not a military expert or anything, but usually you want to keep the generals as far away from combat as possible. And the fact that there were Russian generals actually right on the front lines means that, good God, there were probably not a lot of good personnel out there. Anyways, the Atlantic article also goes into how the same thing happened in Iraq and Afghanistan and led to the death of civilians. If you remember, there were Americans that got prosecuted for war crimes, like Eddie Gallagher is the one I always think of. And this seems to happen when structure fails and you are far removed from home and moral values, especially when there's not a great culture around you. When there is no organizational culture, order just seems to break down. And I think we are seeing that in Bucha in Ukraine as well. Anyways, I think this is important to note because I've seen people wondering, and I myself, I'm guilty of wondering it, is this just the way the Russian culture is when they're up against the wall, with their backs against the wall, I mean, and are the Russians just willing to do this because it's Ukrainians and there's clashes there? I don't think so, no. I think a lot of Russians are just tragically depressed about what's happened, and I think it's less the Russian culture, it's more the military culture, and the organization is kind of to blame for the crimes, you know? I feel like just because Putin has not been told the truth for a while now, this whole thing may start breaking down. You know, once parents ask where their kids are, Putin realizes this conflict is just out of his control. And there's hard opposition even in the East because, I mean, okay, there are separatist movements. There's definitely, it's more feasible for him to do well in the East. But, I mean, based on what we've seen these troops do, I don't even know if the East is going to be quite as obtainable for him as people think. So, yeah, I mean, it's not good. None of this is good. And I think as the tragedies come out, Putin needs to be held accountable. But again, getting him to The Hague, I don't know how that happens. So it's tough. I don't have any solutions at this time.